Hello there, and welcome to this episode of Force Ghost Conversations. This is your host, Anthony King, and this week I'm going to discuss Part 4 from Andor Season 2. If you're a fan of the podcast and would like to consider pledging your support, there will be a link in the episode description for you to check out the various tiers offered. Also, please be sure to check out our TeePublic store to buy some Force Ghost Conversations merchandise. And without further ado, it is time to gather around the campfire for some Force Ghost Conversations. All right, everybody, welcome back to another installment of Force Ghost Conversations. I apologize for a little bit of the audio here, as I'm not recording at Force Ghost Conversations home studio base, but instead I'm recording in a hotel room. So hopefully you don't hear too much of background noise, and apologies if the the air conditioning unit comes on at any point and it causes a little bit of distraction here. I hope that it doesn't. But we're here, of course, to chat about the finale of Andor Season 2. And I'll be honest with you all, because I have a busy weekend at the time that this is coming out. So this comes out on Sunday, as it normally does. But I will be very busy as a human adult in my other life. So this is pre-recorded. That's basically what I'm getting at there. This is a pre-recorded episode to some degree. Recorded earlier in the week, perhaps, is the better way to say it. So with that, I don't really know a whole lot of the news that's come out in the Lucasfilm and Star Wars adjacent galaxy over the past week, other than the fact that, Andor has concluded. You hopefully have seen the final 3 episodes of the series. Spoiler warning ahead, frankly, for that too. So just be forewarned of that. But I assume the final music track have come out as well. Check that out. It probably came out on Friday. And other than that, I don't have any other news here. But I did there. So there is a reason for me recording it, and I'm recording this even before Andor Season 2, the final episodes, Part 4, have dropped. I'm currently recording this at 8:15 p.m. on Tuesday, May 13th. And I'm doing this because we have a question. So if you are a patron at the $1 level, $1 a month, you can get access to a ton of Force Ghost Conversations goodies. You get your name right on the show, and you have the option to submit questions to be both read out loud and answered on the podcast. So, in the spirit of the question that we have, I wanted to get to it before the Andor finale episodes come out. So, patron Daz Davies writes, "Hey Anthony, Diego Luna has been quoted saying that fans will, quote, see a different film, quote, unquote, when they watch Rogue One after seeing the Andor series. Now that the show is coming to a close, do you think that's going to be true? And if so, how do you feel Rogue One will be different for you?" Look, Daz, these are great questions here. And first I want to say, to your early question there, do I think that it's going to be true? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's already changed for me, even the fact that it hasn't fully concluded yet. I think even with season 1, I was already looking at Rogue One differently. Give me the first episodes of it, like, as soon as those first 3 episodes of Andor dropped, I was already looking at the show differently. But I was also already looking at Rogue One differently with more episodes of Star Wars Rebels, and as new comics come out. Frankly, anytime a new Star Wars comes out that I ingest, whether it be a book, a comic, a TV show, animated film, whatever, I recontextualize the entirety of the saga in a new way. You're given more information about characters and backstories, perhaps locations too. So if you're a fan of the universe and you think about it from a critical standpoint, like I'm one to do often, anytime something new comes out should force you to reevaluate or look at things differently. So to your second question here, how do I feel Rogue One would be different for you? Again, like I said, it's already kind of different from me. I mean, especially after the last couple of weeks here, knowing that Cassian and Bix's relationship, I don't necessarily look at it as Jin and him having any sort of romantic entanglement anymore like I once did. I also think I look at K2 differently for his new birth in Star Wars canon. Well, not technically new birth. We can talk about that in a later episode here, or maybe in this discussion here, because I think Star Wars Explained did a great job of talking about that comic that came out and how it can actually both stories work in the quote unquote canon based off of how it came across here. Um, so I'm looking at those characters differently. Melshi, I look at differently, knowing that they had that interaction on Narkina 5. Um, Draven is already a different, right? Like Mon Mothma, especially. So all these characters that we get more time with make me reevaluate and look at Rogue One differently. Um, and seeing how these last 3 episodes end, is it ending with Cassian walking on the Ring of Kafrine and going to see Tivik? Well, I'll find out in just a few minutes here. Um, but all that just going to add to more context for the movie, and I can't imagine looking at it any differently. I mean, think of it this way: did you look at Rogue One, or not Rogue One, but A New Hope entirely differently once you saw Rogue One? Right? I think that's a really prime example of that. Right, where as soon as you were exposed to the real story of what happened, rather than just being in the crawl, right? Especially at the end, right? Like not just the sacrifice of our heroes in Rogue One, but the literal the hallway massacre, basically, to get the Death Star plans through to the Tantive 4, and all that went down before you literally see the events of A New Hope there with Vader capturing that ship and then asking for where the stolen plans are. So all that comes into play here. I always look at something differently, or at least try to recontextualize, and just adds to the overall breadth and warmth that is of this galaxy, that we get these continued stories and allows us to look at things differently and analyze it from a different perspective, which I think is awesome. So that is all the news. And thank you, Jazz, for that question, too. If you want to become a patron, there's a link in the episode description. Again, as little as $1 a month, you can get access to a ton of Force Ghost Conversations goodies and even extra episodes at a certain level. So go check that out if you want to become a patron. We really value your support. All right, folks, on the other side of this short break, we'll be back with our Andor Season 2 finale discussion. Stay tuned. I have friends everywhere. Do you? What an amazing, incredible, magnificent, and frankly poetic way to end Andor Season 2. And frankly, Andor, the series as we know it, because the way this show ends, it literally picks up right where we leave, or we discover Cassian in Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Folks, thank you for coming on this journey with us here. As I kind of mentioned in the preamble, I'm recording in a hotel room, so again, apologies for all the sounds that you may hear here. I'm doing my best here to get an episode out for you all, because you deserve an episode of Force Ghost Conversations every week. And I have now seen the final 3 episodes of Andor Season 2, Part 4, if you will. BBY 1 year before the Battle of Yavin, but almost like a couple days before where it ends up, I don't know. Who cares about the specifics of it? It's leading up to the events of Rogue One, a Star Wars story, and boy, does it get us there. Straight from the top, right? The whole Lonnie and Luthen thing, the finalizing of Deidre, who could not stop this search for Axis, even though it undercuts other people who are working on that project, and then that being used against her to make her seem like she's a rebel spy. This show does a great job at tackling a great thesis here. Thesis, please, as Partagas would say. And for me, the thesis of Andor is in the benefits of a rebellion and working together. We see time and time again how even groups within the rebellion, right? I think of that group earlier in the season that are on Yavin. We didn't know that at the time, but they're fighting within each other, and they get nothing accomplished as a result. That's how Cassian is able to basically escape, and they're left alone to rot and suffer. The Empire is full of that. It is a myriad of people trying to one up each other. There is no trust. There is no sense of, well, there's a sense of loyalty, but I think it's a darkened sense of loyalty, right? It's this loyalty to an empire that will cast you aside. Ultimately, they do. They cast aside Deidre. Cyril finds us out way too late that he was a pawn in this scheme. But ultimately, Andor shows us that time and time again, when people work together, they can achieve incredible feats. Um, and particularly in this set of episodes here, uh, the way that they're able to band together, Melshi, K2, and Cass, to get Kleya out. It's really awesome. The episodes are so tenseful. I almost was like, it just ended. Like there's a part of me that was loving every second of it, but also because of how tense and just like knowing that something's going to happen or anticipating something is going to happen did take a toll on me throughout the course of these 3 episodes here. I will miss Andor season 2 for sure, folks, but I will not miss the 3 almost hour-long episodes being dropped at 9 p.m. Eastern time. I will not miss that one bit. Give me just one episode at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, and I'll be good to go. And then I can watch it a few more times. And then we come on here to chat about it on the podcast. Because I almost feel like I don't have enough. I almost feel a little bit of imposter syndrome. I'll be honest with you all, chatting about this episode here. These set of episodes, frankly. Having watched it once, knowing that, I ingested it. And frankly, it was a very stressful ingestation because of knowing the stakes of the events and what was leading up to. I only knew a couple characters what their fates were, and I was pulling for a lot of other characters to see what their stories were, and hoping that they can continue the story in one way, shape, or form. And that was pretty tense. The whole Kleya heist was some of the most tense television I've ever seen. Not necessarily just the Star Wars story, tense TV all across the band there. Very tense. You can imagine me in my hotel room here, just like sitting at the desk where I have my computer hooked up, and just being like, wow, wow, wow. Are they going to get to her first? Is K2 going to pop in? Is Melshi going to have this moment here where I know he's in Rogue One, but is Kleya sacrificed? Does Cassian have to shoot her like he does Tivik later on in Rogue One? Um, I don't know. And that was really tense. That was really tense. And I will say, just thankfully glad that I loved all the answers that we got for things. I love seeing um, just the inner workings of things again, right? You're seeing how there's some distrust on Yavin, right? Although we have a rebel alliance at this point, it's kind of disjointed. There's a little bit of trust, they're growing trust, and that's where it kind of ends off at, right? Is that like when Kleya is rescued, she feels like an outsider there. You see this journey start to open up there, and she has that like kind of almost Mona Lisa smile in some way about the accomplishments that they were able to make, and that it's all because of Luthen and Kleya and Cassian that were able to get the events of Rogue One and then lead to that wonderful story, which then leads to the great sacrifice that they make there, that then leads to the events of Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope. We talked in the preamble about how we'll view things differently. And now that I've seen the episodes, I can tell you again, matter of fact, there, Daz, who asked the question from our Patreon, that I don't think I could ever look Rogue One, especially at these set of episodes, right? Knowing the journey they required to get there, that Luthen Rail, this guy who basically prophesies his own demise, right? I'm fighting for a sunset I'll never see, or a sunrise I'll never see. Apologies if I got that wrong, but you get the gist of it, what I was explaining out there. And I'm thankful that Kleya was able to get out. He almost protected her in some way because she wanted to send out that note. And I don't know if maybe he was onto something. Maybe in this conversation with Lonnie, that he discovered that potentially they were, Dedramir was more onto him than he suspected, and that was imminent. And then that gave Kleya the or at least he gave her the space to not be there, so that when Dedra does show up, he tries to take his own life because right, she found access, and he's like, I can't be kept here. And Kleya basically, as we got all those flashbacks, right, got all those wonderful flashbacks, Um, I know the theories are going to run rampant now, based off how this episode worked itself out towards the end. Is Kleya actually Cassian's lost sister? That was at the very big plot point at the beginning of this season one. It does highlight. They didn't have to pull that back in there. At least that's on Cassian's mind, and they also didn't have to make young Kleya look very similar to what Cassian's younger sister looked like, etc. I'd love seeing the Luthen backstory in fuller detail. I love that Kleya was a part of his redemption, or at least his journey to not being a part of evil. Literally saying like, "No, I'm not going to be a part of like this massacre here." And of course, that might have been Kenari. That might have been Kenari. Also showing that this is all tied together, right? There's no safe place in the galaxy that is under this fascist oppression. There's no beach town that you can escape to, Cassian. The only escape is fighting against it. Somehow Bix was able to get out, though. And boy, did we get that incredible cliffhanger of some sorts at the end of this. An epilogue of multitude that could lead forward to a plethora of interesting conversation and story from here. Almost like the Rebels one in some way, too, right? Um, Now, that one's a few years later, so we get an older Jason Solo here. Not Solo, Jason Solo. Oh my gosh. Jason Sandula, of course. My apologies there, folks. It's been a long week already, and it's going to be even longer for me too. So just one of those times. But we find out that seemingly, I think we can fairly make the assumption here that Cassian is the father of this child here that Bix is holding, and so that's what Cassian missed out on. That was the sacrifice for the galaxy, right? He gave up all personal attachment. He was truly selfless. And those selfless acts are what allow other people to flourish, to thrive, to have their own autonomy, to self govern, to have rights. This show did a great job of explaining time and time again what we've seen in the course of history how these authoritarian regimes come up. They exploit, they take what they want, and when they tighten their grip on things, that's how things slip through the cracks. Or they're just so worried about not making a mistake that they make mistakes along the way. Thinking about the hospital sequence here, Kleya is just able to cause an easy distraction and then take out a few stormtroopers along the way, and then that's how she's able to take out Luthen. It's tragic that she was forced to do that. But what else if they had kept him alive somehow and tortured him beyond repair? What other sequence would have gone out? You haven't, obviously. The rebellion's doomed. They all, that Rebel Council sequence was really great later on, where they're kind of reprimanded Cassian for what he did there, but he's also like, hey, Luthen died to give us this message here. We got to investigate it forward here. Tivik's reaching out. There's something going on here. There's a rebel. There's a cargo pilot just met with Galen Erso. It's all kind of lining up here. Something's going on. Partagast and Krennic have that kind of conversation. They're like, we're only days away, right? Like Rogue One is just around the corner here, and the events of Star Wars: A New Hope are also around the corner too. I love that sequence. Like I was saying, it's no surprise, it's no secret. You've seen Rogue One by this point that there's this council of rebel leaders, Bail Organa being one of them, Mon Mothma being other, Senator Noor Jabel, who I don't think anybody was as thrilled to see that guy as I was in this show. That was a great pull from Rogue One. You know, I say the rebellion is finished. He's ready to give up. Without they say without the full authority of the council, we cannot authorize this engagement strike. And then that ultimately would lead Cassian and Jin and all them to go off on their own. And frankly, Mon Mothma gets a backbone too later there, and she's like, war is inevitable here. They're all, as much as they want to chastise Saw Gerrera and all that, they got to fight at some point. They just can't keep doing minimal strikes here and there. Eventually, it's going to lead to open war, and that's what the events of Scarif, the Battle of Scarif, does. It is a direct open call, open season, whatever you want to. It's an announcement to the Empire that the Rebel Alliance is here and ready to fight. But to see the discontent, not well, the discontent, but just the disorganization. There is no one leader. They operate under this like democracy of some sorts, and democracy is contentious, right? A lot of fear is amongst this group at this point in time, um, and the unknown of like, oh, there's this weapon going on here. It's all been leading up to this. The Gorman, uh, the events on Jeddah, right? The obsession with Kyber. We don't really know what it's for, but it's ultimately leading to the Death Star. And like I said before, that ambition of Deidre Miro gets her put into a jail cell. That is such a horrific, not tragedy. I think she earned that spot. She did horrible things in the galaxy that she was seemingly unrepentant for. Um, so I take feel free to sit in a jail cell until until you're ready to, which we know is a no way out policy at this point. I especially think after the events of Narkina 5 that there's no way that a person gets out of one of those prisons anymore. They're very probably more strict than ever. So she created a prison of her own, or at least the Empire did, and she thought that she was doing everything. But even the most loyal of people can still, as long as once the Empire is done with you, or there's someone more ambitious than you, like Krennic, or is worried about people, their own consequences, they don't care about the other person. They don't care about providing medical support to others. They'll throw you in a prison cell, and you can rot there forever. Or you could be like Partagast, and then basically be told, "Hey, you gotta commit suicide here." um, there's no love lost. There is just straight. This is the Empire. We're taking unlimited power. We'll do whatever we need to do. We'll jump over everybody to get there. And that's the difference there. You know, trust and togetherness and loyalty to others around you, willing to be selfless, right? Those are we're seeing the same mythology that is derivative of the Jedi and the Sith here, even though there are no Jedi and Sith in this story. It's awesome. It's really awesome. And the fact that Yavin can be the safe haven for a lot of different people is incredible. And then they can say, hey, I can just be a cook here. I don't have to be fighting, or I can just provide medical support, or I can just be a helpful hand. Right? I think of that guy that is in Rogue One. I don't know his character name, but I did point at the screen there when I saw him. The guy that is on like the comms, and then he's like, oh, he runs out to Senator Mothma about the events in Rogue One. He's like, Senator, Senator. He's not firing a blaster. He's not up there in an X-wing. He's not in a U-wing or a Y-wing, or he's not part of Blue Squadron. He's just playing his part, and he's doing something good for the galaxy. And I think it's probably something we all can take from this. What are we doing to be better? What are we doing to be good? How can we take the things that we see around us that are wrong and be a voice for good, a voice for change, a voice for something better? I don't know, something I challenge us all to think about here. And that's and frankly, that is the beauty of Andor season 2 here, especially. We've seen this guy basically started his journey in a brothel, killing 2 cops, and then becoming this leader of the rebellion and ultimately one of its great mythical heroes that then leads to the grand space opera that we know as the original trilogy of the Star Wars story. It's awesome. It's awesome. And I can't wait to rewatch this stuff because, again, like I said, that first watch was tense. I didn't know what was going to happen. I wanted Kleya to make it. I wanted um, I wanted Vel to make it, but I didn't want this deceit. I didn't want these lies. I didn't want this deception here. That's not part of what they. That's not how the rebellion works. You know, that's not how they succeed. At least they fail when they aren't like that. And I like that this was a very much not necessarily a love letter to Luthen, I guess, but it was very complimentary to the understanding of the realism, the practicality that comes with it. And when Cassian's like, "You, none of us would be here if it wasn't for Luthen Rael. Mon Mothma wouldn't be here. Literally, I had to save her because Luthen told me to." Um, Getting a lot of these groups together, the Aldani item, uh, that whole sequence, and who knows the countless number of tips and details and things that were shared because of Luthen. And although this rebellion wanted to distance themselves from the like of him, and Saw Gerrera clearly too is also in play here. Um, Now I'm glad that he got his flowers in some way. This is a character that is complicated, and it was very upfront about the complicated nature here, and he liked working alone and kind of in the shadows. And he knew at some point it would run out for him. All the luck, all of the, all the the deception, the being really literally under the nose of the Empire and the ISB was only gonna get you so far. And they built up Yavin. Yavin was ready to go, and eventually that was his time. And he wasn't able to see that sunrise that he was hoping for. But it doesn't. The sunrise doesn't happen without him. That's also true. And he took on Kleya and gave her a space to do something good because the Empire took something from her too. She might be Cassian's sister. That's not off the table at this point. Um, so I'm glad it was. I'll be happy to rewatch these episodes again with a much more clearer head, and just to soak it all in. I will say though, my biggest takeaway here is how much I loved it, but also I feel like I was a little robbed too. And I was robbed in the fact that we didn't get the full 5 season, one 12 episode season, 10 episode per year instead of the 3 episode arcs. Because it would have been so great to just have spent more time with all these characters. And we talked with Tiara last week about that, where it can be a little jarring, where it's like, oh, now this happened last year, and now this is this year, and all that stuff. I totally get that. Um, and I frankly, I'm like, I wish we lived in the timeline where we did get the 10 episodes, 12 episodes here, because to see this thing more extrapolated upon further would have been so cool. No, I'm not complaining. I love what we got here. It just is a little like, oh, the what if. What other stories could we have had? What more adventures with K2 could we potentially have been witness to? It was great seeing those two again on screen. It's been almost 10 years since we were introduced to that wonderful bond that is the nature of Cassian and K2SO. What I was geeking up. I was geeking out and cracking up and all that. We got to see some Admiral Raddus in this. Got to see Pow. So many characters from Rogue One appearing in this thing. So many Tivik mentions. The Ring of Kafrene is coming here, and that's ultimately where the story leads off. It's Cassian being told by Draven to go on this mission to check out the intel from Tivik, and that's the beginning of Rogue One. Aside from the Wobani sequence and the Jinn being sent to live with Saw at the age of 5 or so. It's really the motions of Rogue One that move it forward, and then we're introduced to Cassian, and we're kind of seeing at that point the remnants of the Luthen training. that he had, right? Shooting Tivik, uh, because he was never going to crawl out of that hole, um, not out of that hole, but out of that space. And if he was captured and interrogated, like, it could lead back to Yavin, right? That's that kind of spy choice that you have to make quick in those moments there of like Luthen did taking out Lonnie, right? Yavin was a myth when he's offering that up as a way for an escape, right? That promised land that they both cannot see. But all the work that they did along the way, Lonnie living in this underneath this ISB umbrella to get to that point was all the sacrifice along the way, which makes the sacrifices of Rogue One even more harder. Not necessarily harder, but more tragic, I think, for me as well. And just also the events of New Hope just mean a lot more. I think this is great. We have these stories. I think Rebels also does a wonderful job of patching that up. Obi-Wan Kenobi for sure does too. Solo, I think, also helps to explain what the dark times are like. All these stories that are in between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope continue to add to this storytelling that make the punch of A New Hope even better. So I hope that you all have setting aside some time in the next couple of weeks here to do a watch. Maybe you watch the last arc of Andor, and then you go straight into Rogue One, and then you go straight into A New Hope. That's an awesome triple feature, if you ask me. I might be doing that pretty soon here. I'm just thrilled that this show existed. It exists. There's so much more to talk about here. Again, like I'm saying, I feel like I'm just scratching the surface when it comes to the thematic elements of this thing because there's so much to digest from it. And from one watch at like 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern time before I got to head to bed and then get up super early for almost 12 plus hour workday, I feel like I'm a little out of place here to be giving these full thoughts and all that. So I thank you all for coming on this journey here. We're actually going to talk about this more next week, or we'll kind of do a full season retrospective here. We'll have a guest on for that. So we'll dive into more of this in the coming weeks here because Andor season, just because the season ended, doesn't mean that Andor season ends for us too. I also wanted to note that if you want to continue, like you're in this Andor mood and you want to continue moving forward, the Rogue One novelization by Alexander Freed is tip top as well. But I think Beth Revis's Rebel Rising, which tells the story pretty much of Jyn Erso from where we see her go with Saw at the beginning of Rogue One to the Wobani prison camp where Cassian and K2 capture her. Or is Melshi and K2? Can't remember if Cassian's actually there or not. That book is really great. I think that just adds to the legend of myth that around Jyn and all that. And oh man, how can I forget? Catalyst too is another great one, which is the initial tie-in story prequel for Rogue One, a Star Wars story, and showcases the interplay between Galen and the early days of the Death Star project or Project Stardust. I'm surprised they didn't say Project Stardust too. They said Death Star a few times. They didn't want to keep it under its other name. Anywho, folks, that is all that I can think of at this moment for all the glory and wonder and joy that is Andor Season 2, Part 4. I can't wait to watch it again. I hope that you do so as well. And like I said, the Andor conversation is going to continue. So stay here, stay tuned to the podcast because we've got a lot of great Andor conversation coming your way here, folks. So very soon. Yeah, I'm definitely at the end of in the middle of a long week here, so best to close up shop here. Well, I thank you all for listening to my muses, my thoughts on this incredible season so far. If you want to continue the conversation, of course, we're available on all the social media platforms, whether it be X, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Threads, Blue Sky. Just search for Force Ghost Conversations and you'll find us there. And again, yeah, if you want to support our Patreon for as little as $1 a month, you get access to a ton of different Force Ghost Conversations goodies, including being able to ask questions for a little $1 a month. You can ask questions like that, like our pal Daz did, and you can answer them. And I think that was a good way to do it, to answer that before the events of Andor season 2 part 4, and then to recontextualize it once I'd seen those. And I think that was a really great way to do that. So yeah, if you want to ask your own questions, $1 a month. I bet you a lot of other things too. And if you want to go even higher, heck, we can start doing extra episodes at the certain levels there. So that'd be great. So folks, we'll be back next week with a brand new episode in your podcast feeds. And until then, may the force be with you. Take care.